Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis, which you need to know for AQA A-level psychology in the subtopic of attachment. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Bowlby, 1951, proposed the maternal deprivation hypothesis, which suggests that attachment and care between an infant and their mother or mother substitute is essential for a normal and healthy psychological development of an infant, both emotionally and intellectually. Bowlby, 1953, proposed that a warm, intimate and continuous relationship with a mother is necessary for healthy psychological and emotional development, stating that mother-love infancy is as important for mental health as are vitamins and proteins for physical health. Infants who experience prolonged and continuous separation, where the infant is not in the presence of their primary attachment figure, and deprivation, the loss of emotional care that would normally be provided by a primary caregiver, are classified as being maternally deprived and are likely to also experience serious and harmful consequences to their social, intellectual and emotional development. Intellectual development. Bowlby suggested that maternal deprivation can lead to cognitive delays, difficulties in learning, and impaired intellectual functioning. Bowlby identified mental retardation or an intellectual disability, characterized by abnormally low IQ, where individuals may have difficulty reasoning, problem-solving and learning new information. Emotional development. Bowlby suggested that maternal deprivation can impact how individuals regulate their emotions, form healthy relationships, and cope with stress and adversity. Bowlby identified affectionless psychopathy as the inability to experience guilt or strong emotion for or towards others. This prevents the person developing healthy and normal relationships. This can lead to high rates of criminality as the individuals are unable to empathize with the feelings of their victims and also lack remorse for their actions. Social development. Bowlby suggested that maternal deprivation can impact how individuals interact within society and adhere to societal norms and laws. Bowlby identified delinquency as behaviors, especially among young people, that are considered antisocial or criminal, such as lawbreaking or engaging in activities that go against societal norms or laws. The short-term effects of maternal deprivation are seen through protesting, such as outward expressions of separation anxiety, e.g. crying, kicking, and running away; despair, where the infant still feels separation anxiety inwardly, but the behavior becomes more apathetic, e.g. sulking, sucking thumb for comfort; and detachment, where the infant will interact with people again, but may initially reject the mother when she returns due to anger. The long-term effects of maternal deprivation are seen as inability to form bonds with other people, an avoidant or dismissive attachment type, aggression, dwarfism, dependency, depression, with individuals most commonly being diagnosed with an attachment disorder due to their emotional and social maladjustments. Bowlby believed that these effects were permanent and irreversible. Based on Bowlby's principle of the internal working model, the infant and mother's relationship is crucial in acting as a template for the infant's future parental relationships. If an infant has a good infant-mother relationship, then the infant is more likely to form a positive internal working model, which is most likely to lead to an infant having an ability to be a good parent. If an infant has a bad infant-mother relationship, then the infant is most likely to form a negative internal working model, which is most likely to lead to an infant having an inability to be a good parent. Bowlby saw the first 30 months of an infant's life as a critical period for psychological development. If an infant experiences prolonged, a loss of or an extended period of separation from their mother, then the infant will be deprived of emotional care, and Bowlby believed psychological damage and emotional disturbance was inevitable. He also believed there was a continuing risk of this up until the age of 5. However, long-term psychological harm and emotional disturbance could be avoided if a substitute mother is able to provide suitable emotional care and be sufficiently sensitive to the infant's needs. Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis has several strengths and limitations. A strength of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that there is research to support Bowlby's proposal that children who are deprived of maternal care during the critical period become delayed in their intellectual development. Goldfarb, 1947, conducted a study to investigate whether deprivation has an effect on the development of deprived children using children from Chidi and wartime orphanages. He found that children who had remained in institutions had lower IQ scores compared to those who were fostered and had a higher standard of emotional care. When IQ was measured at age 12, the foster group had an average IQ of 96, whereas the institutional group averaged only 68, below the cutting point that is used to define intellectual disability. This is a strength because it suggests that the quality of early caregiving, particularly maternal care, plays a pivotal role in shaping a child's intellectual development and overall cognitive abilities, underscoring the critical importance of nurturing and supportive environments during formative years. A strength of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that there is research to support Bowlby's idea that maternal love is crucial for an infant's psychological development. Marian Radke-Arrow et al., 1985, found that a lack of emotional support, deprivation, and maternal love can lead to insecure attachment behavior. They studied mothers who were severely depressed and unable to provide emotional care to their children. Consequently, the results found that 55% of the depressed sample of mothers had children with insecure attachments compared to only 29% of a control group of non-depressed mothers. This is a strength because it suggests that the presence of emotional support and maternal love, as emphasized in Bowlby's maternal deprivation theory, significantly influences the development of secure attachment behaviors in children, highlighting the profound impact of early caregiving experiences on attachment outcomes. A strength of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that there is research to support Bowlby's idea that disruption of attachment during the critical period can cause later emotional disturbance. Bifalco et al., 1992, studied women who had been separated from their mothers either due to death or temporary separation of more than a year. Bifalco found that 25% of these women later experienced depression or an anxiety disorder. A control group who had experienced no separation found only 15% suffered from such mental disorders, with those who suffered the greatest problems experiencing their loss before the age of 6 years old. This is a strength because it suggests that disruptions in attachment during critical developmental periods, as proposed by Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis, can indeed lead to later emotional disturbances, highlighting the significant impact of early attachment experiences on long-term mental health outcomes. A strength of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that there is research to suggest that it had a significant impact upon child rearing. Bowlby's theory, which highlighted the importance of the mother in forming early attachments, led to a cultural shift where mothers and babies were no longer separated. Robertson, 1952, found that the hypothesis had a major impact on the post-war thinking about child-rearing practices, especially in hospitals. Often, infants were separated from their mothers when in hospital, visiting was discouraged or even banned as it often made the children distressed when the parents left. Robertson, College of Bowlby, filmed a 2-year-old girl called Laura during the 8 days she was in hospital and used time-sampled the filming to 2 40-minute sessions a day to avoid the criticism that he was only filming when she was distressed. They found that the girl was often frequently distressed and begged to go home. This is a strength because it suggests that Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis had a tangible impact on child-rearing practices, especially in hospitals, by highlighting the crucial role of maintaining the mother-child bond to prevent distress in children during separations. This emphasis on emotional connections between children and their primary caregivers influenced a cultural shift towards more attentive caregiving practices, promoting the well-being and development of children in institutional settings. A limitation of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that there is research to contradict Bowlby's idea of a critical period. Bowlby believed damage was inevitable if an infant had not formed an attachment in the first 30 months of their lives. However, there is research to suggest that in many cases good quality aftercare can prevent most or all of this damage. Kolochova, 1976, reported on a case of Czech twins. The twins experienced very severe physical and emotional abuse from the age of 18 months up until they were 7 years old. Although they were severely damaged emotionally from this experience, they received excellent care, and by the time they reached their teen years, they had fully recovered. This is a limitation because it suggests that the lasting, long-term harm of maternal deprivation is not inevitable even in cases of severe privation, as demonstrated by the case of the Czech twins who, despite experiencing severe abuse, were able to fully recover with excellent care provided afterward. A limitation of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that it is deterministic. Bowlby's hypothesis does not specify how long the disruption of attachment has to occur for, in order for the disruption to be classified as maternal deprivation. This therefore assumes that any child experiencing disruption even for a short period during infancy may suffer from delayed emotional, social, or intellectual development. However, Kagan et al. 1978 found no direct causal link between separation and later emotional and behavioral difficulties. This is a limitation because it suggests that there may not be a direct causal link between separation experiences during infancy and later emotional and behavioral difficulties, as indicated by the research conducted by Kagan et al. 1978. A limitation of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that there is a lack of differentiation and confusion between deprivation and privation. It is not clear exactly whether the children observed in his study had already formed attachments and then were broken, deprivation, or whether they had formed any attachment initially, privation. Rutter, 1981, drew an important distinction between these two types of early negative experience. Deprivation strictly refers to the loss of the primary attachment figure after attachment has been developed, whilst on the other hand, privation is the failure to form any attachment in the first place. Rutter argued that a distinction needed to be made as he believed a lack of attachment bond and privation would have far more of a negative impact on the child's mental development than deprivation and an attachment bond being broken, as he pointed out that the severe long-term damage Bowlby associated with deprivation is actually more likely to be the result of privation. This is a limitation because it suggests that the distinction between deprivation and privation is crucial in understanding the varying impacts on a child's mental development, as highlighted by Rutter's differentiation between these two types of early negative experiences. A limitation of Bowlby's maternal deprivation hypothesis is that it suffers from gender-biased and is socially sensitive. The hypothesis can be perceived as placing undue pressure on mothers as it primarily focuses on the mother as the primary caregiver, whose absence or inadequacy can lead to negative outcomes for the child. This potentially overlooks the roles of other caregivers in a child's development and assumes a traditional gender role where the mother is solely responsible for the child's emotional well-being, with potentially negative consequences on the infant if this bond is disrupted. This neglects the potential role of other caregivers or fathers in the child's development and perpetuates stereotypes about gender roles and parenting responsibilities, overlooking the importance of diverse caregiving arrangements and the impact of fathers or other caregivers on a child's attachment and social development. This is a limitation because it suggests that the maternal deprivation hypothesis might place undue pressure on mothers as primary caregivers, potentially overshadowing or disregarding the roles of other caregivers or the fathers in a child's development. Bowlby's 44 Thieves Study. Bowlby, 1944, aimed to investigate whether there was a link between maternal deprivation in infancy and affectionless psychopathy and delinquency in adolescence. Bowlby conducted a quasi-experiment and used an opportunity sample. Bowlby analyzed the case history of children attending his Child Guidance Clinic Center and selected a sample consisting of 44 criminal teenagers who had been accused of theft and persistent offending. They were compared to a control group of 44 emotionally disturbed, non-criminal teenagers. The two groups were matched for age and IQ. All thieves were interviewed and tested for signs of affectionless psychopathy, characterized by a lack of affection, lack of guilt, lack of shame for their offending actions and behaviors, lack of sense of responsibility, and lack of empathy for their victims. Their families were also interviewed in order to establish whether the thieves had prolonged early separations in infancy from their mothers. The interviews and tests were conducted by a psychiatrist, Bowlby, a psychologist, and a social worker. 17 out of 44 thieves, 39%, had experienced prolonged separation from their mothers in the first 2 years of their lives. 14 out of 44 thieves, 32%, could be described as affectionless psychopaths, with 12 out of the 14, 86%, experiencing prolonged separation from their mothers in the first 2 years of their lives, often due to hospitalization or being in foster care. In contrast, only 5 of the remaining 30 thieves, 17%, had experienced separations. Of the control group, only 2 out of 44 had experienced long separations. There is a causal link between prolonged early separation and deprivation and, later, emotional difficulties, causing affectionless psychopathy. A lack of continuous care may cause emotional maladjustments or mental disorders. A limitation of Bowlby's 44 Thieves study is that it was based on retrospective information. Bowlby interviewed parents and families about their teenagers' upbringing and lifestyle. This information was therefore collected after the teenagers grown up and either committed crimes or suffered emotional disturbance. It is likely that the family's recall of the teenagers' childhood events were inaccurately as a result of memory distortions, forgetting details over time or being influenced by current feelings or beliefs when recalling past events. The information collected could therefore be subjective, as it is known that their once children experience some form of disruption to their social or emotional development. This is a limitation because it suggests that Bowlby's 44 Thieves study was based on retrospective information, potentially leading to inaccuracies in parents' recollections of their teenagers' childhood events due to memory distortions or current feelings influencing their recall. A limitation of Bowlby's 44 Thieves study is that it lacks internal validity. Lewis, 1954, attempted to replicate the 44 Thieves study. He looked at 500 teenagers and found no association between early separation and later psychopathy of criminality or relationship difficulties. This is a limitation because it suggests that Lewis, 1954, attempted to replicate the 44 Thieves study and found no association between early separation and later psychopathy or criminality in teenagers, challenging the internal validity of Bowlby's original study. A limitation of Bowlby's 44 Thieves study is that the findings and conclusions drawn may be affected by researcher bias. Bowlby carried out his 44 Thrives study, the family interviews involved in collecting the data and the assessment of affectionless psychopathy himself. This left him open to bias because he knew in advance which teenagers he expected to show signs of psychopathy. This is a limitation because it suggests that Bowlby's direct involvement in the 44 Thieves study, from conducting family interviews to assessing psychopathy, could have introduced researcher bias, as he had preconceived expectations of which teenagers would display signs of psychopathy. A limitation of Bowlby's 44 Thieves study is that the findings and conclusions are based on correlational data. Bowlby established a causal link between prolonged early separation and deprivation and, later, emotional difficulties, causing affectionless psychopathy. This does not establish a cause and effect relationship, and therefore this does not prove that a change in one variable causes the change in another. There may be a third confounding variable that influences both factors independently, such as poverty, as it may be that children from poorer backgrounds more likely to be hospitalized due to poorer care or socioeconomic factors resulting in poorer sanitation. This could suggest that it is not necessarily a disruption or lack of attachment that leads to emotional difficulties. This is a limitation because it suggests that Bowlby's study relied on correlational data, which doesn't establish a cause and effect relationship between early separation and later emotional difficulties. The presence of a third confounding variable, like poverty, could influence both factors independently, suggesting that emotional difficulties may not solely result from a disruption in attachment. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.